Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Hall. I'm Executive Director of the Youth Court Initiative. Happy to report that we're going to be fully funded starting in November, which will certainly enhance our work. And we are in very good standing, we think, with the school district, and I think it should be a productive year.
Thanks, Mary. Do you want to call on someone else?
Sure. I on my screen see Erin next.
Hi, I'm Erin Dalton. I'm the Director of the Department of Human Services, and I'll go to Ashley.
Hey everyone, I'm Ashley Kostrub. I am actually a new school-based liaison with OVH. So myself and Haley are both new. So we are just jumping on to say hello and to see how everything works. Haley.
Hi, I'm Haley Dillman. Just like Ashley said, I'm new school-based liaison, and Ashley put it perfectly. We're just trying to learn all the ins and outs and appreciate you letting us participate today. So I see Laura, maybe.
Hi guys, I'm Laura McWilliams. I'm the head of the Juvenile Division at the Public Defender's Office. I will call on Dara.
Hi, my name is Sarah DeChellis. I work for CYF. I'm a project manager of a couple different things, but the one that is pertinent to this conversation is the project manager for Crossover Youth. So kids who are dually involved in CYF and juvenile probation. And I think there's someone on the phone, maybe. I don't know if they want to introduce themselves.
Yeah, who's ever on the phone, that phone number that ends 6441. If you're able to unmute and introduce yourself, that'd be great. Maybe they're not right now. Or maybe they spoke before too. Well, anyway, we'll see. Kathy, are you there right now? And do you want to introduce yourself too?
I'm Kathy Elliott, CEO of Gwen's Girls and the convener of the Black Girls Equity Alliance. Let's see who else. I think that's everybody, right? And again, as Sarah said, thank you all for being here. I know Kim, she's with the CIS program at the Hall of Fame, so she has said she wasn't able to join, and then Tashara, who usually helps in this capacity, is not able to join us and may join us late, but so thank you all for being here. So Sarah,
Dr. Kathy.
Yes.
Can you? Hey, I'm sorry. This is Tamara. If you called on me, I was on the other line with my IT guy trying to figure out what the heck's going on with our Zoom. But just glad to be here. Unfortunately, it's taken forever, and I got to hop off around 4 for another meeting. But you all know I'm always going to try to be here when I can and support you all, and appreciate all that you're doing.
Thank you. So that's Tamara Collier from the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So Sarah, if you can go ahead with the agenda.
Yeah, so we had planned today as a time to talk through this new report that a bunch of us worked on. And so I mean, we are a small group, but I thought I would drop the PDF in the chat so that everyone can see it if you haven't seen it already. Maybe even then can't talk and do that at the same time, but maybe we can just like pause for 5 minutes for people to even look through a bit, or maybe we can find out who has seen it and who hasn't, and then have some conversation. You know, this work group was really instrumental in thinking through and being part of a lot of the discussions that where we gathered some information and learned from people in other places, and then also thinking through some of the recommendations. Okay, so let me stop talking and try to put it in the chat. and other people are free to talk while I'm working on that task. Okay, it's showing it at, can you all see it yet? It seems like it's still
No,
loading on my, it's working on it. I think I have a bad connection here, but it should be there momentarily. And if not, if I have to move somewhere else where the connection is better, let me try to do that. It's still, oh, I see it. I must have a terrible connection because it's showing me progress. It's in a little bit slow. Maybe it would be helpful to find out who, I guess, has already seen it, or who, maybe even more importantly, who hasn't, in terms of time we might need to look at it before we talk through. Is there, who has already seen it? Or even
I've
knows what I'm
seen
talking
it, but I've only, scanned it. I don't feel that I've mastered it. I'd like to get into it more deeply.
Why doesn't someone like maybe walk through? I mean, I have read it, but I mean, maybe if someone like if Sarah, you were involved, or Kathy, like just walk through the key findings. I mean, there's a lot there in the young people's stories, but but there are some clear recommendations, high points you are putting forward.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think I can do that and even share. It is still loading. I see it's going to be uploaded there soon. I'll try sharing my screen, and I hope you all will tell me if I need to move somewhere to a different room that has a better internet connection if this isn't working. I'm not at home or at work in my usual office spaces. So, but I think that would be good. I can share the screen and we can talk through the different pieces together. So, and this is getting me ready for the fall semester of more Zoom meetings and sharing screen and everything. So let me just reopen it. Okay. 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 All right. Do you all see that now?
There we are. Now we can. At least I can.
And should I make it
Yes.
bigger? I don't know how it's looking on your screen. Would that be helpful? That's
Would you
just
say-
the cover right now. Oh, I was just asking about the size of it. How does that look?
That looks fine. I don't know what it'll look like when we start seeing the text.
That's true.
I think we'll be missing the bottom of the page.
But it's not, I have some of you a little bit covering the screen now, or never mind. You'll tell me if you can't see it.
Yeah.
So, or I hope, well, let me just say this. First of all, please tell me if you can't see it or if you have any questions as I talk through it real quick, please just interrupt. I can't see all of you super well while I'm doing this, so just unmute and start talking. I don't mind being interrupted at all, especially because we're such a small group. That'll probably work best. So, and if you can't hear me at any point because of my internet connection, please tell me that too. I really obviously did not plan any kind of formal presentation, but I am really excited to have this opportunity to talk through what was a group effort and really many months of just thinking, talking, and learning together to get to this point. And, you know, we talk about in the report, well, also let me just mention the beautiful artwork on the cover by Morgan Overton. Morgan was actually one of my students in the School of Social Work at Pitt and is well known in a lot of other places around town. And she had this beautiful picture that she shared with us to use on the cover. And then this second page is artwork by a young person who one of the collaborators on the report, Beth Sondell, was someone that she had been connected with that was willing to share their art for the report as well. So, so just to kind of the beginning of it kind of talks about our process a little bit. And, you know, this really started when Schumann was closed. Schumann was the juvenile detention center, I'm sure you all know, in Allegheny County, opened in the 70s and then closed pretty suddenly in September 2021. And a lot of us that were part of this juvenile justice work group and in other spaces, we're talking at that moment about what might happen next and what should happen next, and seeing this as an opportunity to expand our thinking perhaps and learn from ideas and things that were being tried in other places that might give us some ideas for a way to improve support for young people in Allegheny County. So anyway, the first part of the report just presents a little bit of background on that and how and the work we did together. And I'm going to go through that. First 2 pages are just a summary of all the rest of it. So I'm going to go to the, oops, sorry. Are you, does that look okay? Yeah. And did finish loading the chat?
It's not in the chat yet.
It's still not okay. Wait, let me, well, okay. Hopefully it will finish loading there soon. But can you see it okay? Oops. Let me see. Oh, Laura, thank you for putting a link to it online. It is almost done loading in the chat. I can see that now, actually, but thank you for putting that link. That's another place to get to it. All right, so so again, the report starts with a little bit of background about why Schumann was closed, which I'm guessing people are pretty familiar with, and just background about what's happening across the country right now, that there are a lot of conversations happening, and in many places, really organized campaigns around ending youth incarceration. And I think though there are, part of what we learned in this is there are real diversity, obviously, of positions that people are coming from, opinions about best ways to support youth. But I think all of us share a goal of, you know, having as few young people locked up as possible and building more supportive systems and you know, really just beyond like even what we think of as child welfare and juvenile justice, but right, as a society to kind of make youth incarceration obsolete. And so that was a goal that we all shared as we came together to do this work. which, as I said, a lot of it happened through this juvenile justice work group. And part of what we realized, as it says at the end here, was that we really wanted to challenge all of us to think about how the safety of young people and communities are interdependent goals, not in opposition, right? So sometimes young people are held in detention with the justification to keep communities safe. And of course we understand that, but I think when we take a broader view about building supports, we can see that what will ultimately help young people be safe will also help our communities be safer as well. And in the report, we then talk through a little bit about the process that we went through to learn together and come up with this report. So from November of 2021 through February of 2022, we had a number of meetings. Many of them were held through our Black Girls Equity Alliance Juvenile Justice Work Group monthly meetings that are the third Thursday of every month. We had a few additional meetings as well. And we did invite people in other places who have developed some alternatives to juvenile detention facilities. And then we also had a number of listening sessions and interviews with young people who had spent time at Schumann. And so in terms of the first learning goal, to learn about what was happening in other places, we were really fortunate to be connected with people from the Free LA School in Los Angeles. And that school was opened by the Youth Justice Coalition after successful organizing to close their local juvenile detention facility. And we had a couple of planning meetings, and then at our, I think, January juvenile justice work group meeting, teachers, staff, and even a number of students joined via Zoom from LA and shared their experiences with us. It was a really incredible meeting. Kathy recorded that meeting. So if anyone wants to watch that recording and listen to all of what we learned from our colleagues in LA, I encourage you to do so. There were about 60 or 70 people on the call, and it was just really, I think it expanded for many of us how we were thinking about what was possible by hearing about what they're able to do there. So that was one thing, and the report in just a moment, I'll talk through some of the specific things they shared. As I said, the other main learning goal was to learn from people who had spent time at Schumann. And so we had a number of people who were able to conduct interviews and listening sessions with 18 young people ranging in age from 14 to 27. So some of them had, their time at Schumann was not as recent as others, but they were really diverse in a lot of ways and shared important experiences and perspectives with us. So in the report, we first describe what the young people had to say about their time at Schumann. And Beth Sondel and I did a lot of the analysis of the interview data. And then some of you might remember at work group meetings, we brought some of the excerpts from the interviews and talked through some of those in small groups. So we heard a lot from young people just about basic issues of safety and having their basic needs met. And so some involved things like food and also just violence and safety. There were often fights at Schumann. Sometimes some of the threats came directly from staff who were either unprofessional or even in fact predatory and abusive. I'm not saying that was all of the staff. I know there were many really good staff as well, but of course it's the difficult experiences that I think stay with young people. And you can see on this page, a number of the young women talked about staff who were sexually abusive and used their power as staff to manipulate the girls sexually. There were fights involving staff. There was retaliation from staff. sometimes drugs involved. So those were really difficult experiences for young people, obviously. And we heard a lot from young people too about the need for mental health resources and support. Now, I know that, well, we all know that a detention center is meant to be a place where people don't stay very long. So obviously, and this was something that we all discussed a lot, it's not necessarily a place where people get long-term therapeutic services, but we heard so much from the young people that we listened to about their traumatic experiences before they were in the facility, and about just a need to be in an environment where they had support for kind of, even in the short term, dealing with some of the trauma and the challenges they were facing. And then we also heard from young people about the desire for activities to provide important training for their lives moving forward, to be continually learning, and then also to be planning for their time after they got out of Schumann, right? And to have support in doing that. So, I'll read you our 2-sentence summary of what we heard from the young people. It was clear from listening to them and talking with them that mostly they found Schumann to be inhospitable. It didn't keep them safe for the most part, and it didn't help them to develop, learn, or grow. It's hard to hear this. It was really hard to hear these things from the young people, but we believe that our young people deserve care and support no matter what they've done. And we hope that, again, this process, as well as the report, can be part of helping us all figure out and support what happens next. And this is probably a good time just to say that, honestly, I hope the report itself is useful. And as I said, it was a really collaborative effort, but part of what we learned also was just the process of developing the report. We had so many rich, productive conversations among people who come from really different places and have different beliefs. And I felt just the process itself was really helpful for all of us, even if we had never managed to write it up into a report. But I'm glad that we did. So based on what we learned from the young people, as well as from the colleagues in Los Angeles, we wrote this section that we called The Path Towards Ending Youth Detention. And we just kind of, again, tried to kind of summarize into some themes and specific questions and recommendations what might be useful going forward. And so I'll just briefly review these recommendations. So the first one, which you can see here, was to re-envision safety and support, not punishment, as the purpose of youth serving institutions and programs. So all young people deserve to feel and to be safe, right? And the juvenile justice system was, that we even have a separate system for young people is based on this idea that young people are still changing and growing and can be rehabilitated. And I think too often in all parts of the system, we sometimes forget that, or it's easy to move away from that. And it's not to say that there shouldn't be consequences, but that I think, again, consequences and accountability are different than punishment. And especially in a detention facility where young people haven't even gone through an adjudication process, it's certainly any kind of punishment is preemptive in the sense that they haven't even had the chance to go before the judge often. So we talk about really just sort of physical safety as well as psychological safety in terms of re-envisioning safety, which, as you all saw, was the overall theme of the report. Again, we talk about employing caring staff who are well trained and well supported to provide the support to youth that they need. And we go into a little bit more detail. Again, none of these recommendations are brand new things that other people haven't said and observed and shared before, but really this is just our attempt to kind of bring some of this together in a document that might be useful for us all moving forward. We also talked about investing in trauma-informed and healing-focused services and supports, both within our juvenile justice system, but also really outside of that, right? Because the goal is to not have young people be involved in some of these broader systems, and to be having support and healing available in the community. We also were so impressed with the liberatory schooling model that they were using at the Free LA school. And so we recommended that in our county, we explore some similar kind of school in Allegheny County. And I'm sure that would look different here than it does in Los Angeles. But listening to the staff and the teachers and the young people talk about their experiences at the school in LA was such a powerful experience for us, and really made us think about how to interrupt some of the violence that young people are both experiencing and engaging in through this kind of model. And really at the end of the report, we have some quotes from some of the staff, teachers, and students at the Free LA school, because their words were really incredibly powerful, I think. And that's pretty much it. We have a couple of definitions at the end of the report, and that's it. So I'm going to stop screen sharing. Hopefully everyone has been able to see the report now anyway, both from the chat or from the link. And I would love to open it up for comments, questions, or specific things people would like to talk further about from the report or otherwise.
Good. Oh, sorry.
Hey, Erin.
Hi. Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, no, I think it's helpful, and I'm appreciative of the folks who put it all together. And you know, I think folks know this. DHS is not directly involved in contracting for, or managing the juvenile detention or juvenile justice system, but we obviously care deeply about these kids, who are often kids where we are almost always involved in some way or another, particularly making sure that their health, behavioral health, and education needs are met. So I think it's helpful as the systems who are responsible continue to plan, and if there is to be an execution of any new detention, that they that they pay attention to the. And I mean, I think people strive for this. It's not like, people strive for, well-trained, caring staff with access to services and so on. But I appreciate it being written down in the voice of young people.
Yeah, and it can just a real quick response, because I know others are waiting to talk, but I think especially about the staff. I mean, I think one of our goals with writing up some of this is to provide support for all of you all and people out there who are saying we need resources, right? To pay staff enough to, get people who are well-trained or train people who want to do this job and really be able to support them. So I agree.
Well, what can we do about that? It sounds to me as if we need to put together a partnership with the universities and schools that could provide training for staff, and work with community organizations to recruit people to avail themselves of that training. I mean, part of it is tuition, is it not? In terms of setting up programs that are affordable for people to enter. Were you able to hear me, Sarah?
Oh, I heard you. Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, I think a lot of the, I think there are people on this call who could speak to this much better than I could, but a lot of the staff positions at a lot of facilities are, a lot of the line staff that don't necessarily aren't always, there aren't always the resources, I think, to pay and support people as I think people need to. I mean, this is an issue at so many places, right? I'm not saying anything people don't know, but a lot of the staff who work in a lot of facilities, it's not necessarily, I don't think it's always about the access to kind of like, I mean, it is about access to all kinds of different training and education, but a lot of it is about the support they have in the positions that they're in that keeps people there, because these are challenging jobs. Like, I think we should be honest about that too. Tamara, I think you were gonna.
Yeah, so a lot of things. I was actually just speaking up because it was really quiet and I didn't want to leave you hanging out there, because I think this was a great job. That's where I started. But I love that you're putting in a trauma piece on it. We've been having a whole lot of conversations on that, and not just the trauma of the youth, but the trauma of the staff. And, so there's so many layers to all of this. We need to actually address that part. The DOC actually, Secretary Little is actually starting to do that with his staff. And they're working on being trauma informed from top down, and how they actually treat everybody. But in order to get there, they have to figure out, they have to start looking at how staff is being treated and how, what staff is actually going through. Because I'm in a lot of conversations about, that the answer to our violence prevention is bringing Schumann back. And I'm always pushing back. If we bring Schumann back, it has to be better. Because, it really wasn't, obviously, Schumann was there for the reason that it was, but, all of our correctional facilities or juvenile facilities have to be in a position to make people better, or we're just going to keep getting, to the place where we are right now. And it's really frustrating for everyone and unsafe for a lot of people. I just think that I don't know that it's the training. I think that has to be a cultural shift in how we're actually doing what we're doing. If we're, how we're going to work with individuals, helping them to move forward. It's not always this punishment, I mean, there have to be consequences, but what are we actually doing to make someone better, whether they're a young person or an adult? I mean, that's what obviously, I'm reentry coordinator, but also community outreach specialist. I'm just seeing that in all levels. So I hope I'm loving what you put together, and thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thank you, Tamara. No, I mean, I agree completely. I think your points about the staff are so important in terms of one, just I mean, often staff who are motivated to work at places like this might be people who have had some similar experiences to some of the young people, and that is actually really great. But especially when staff have had their own traumas and past experiences, they even more need that support to work through that so they can be there for the young people. And I mean, that was exactly when we had the listening session with the people from the 3 LA school. Some of the staff there, one of the stories that's in the report was a current staff member talking about her experiences when she was a student at the 3 LA school, right? And that incident of when she got in the fight with another girl. And that was one of the most powerful moments to me in that listening session with them, was to hear her talk about how this approach that they used there, this transformative justice, made a difference in her life. And it made me, I mean, I kind of know this through my work too, but it just, hearing it from someone who's walked through it really shows the difference that can make. And it's actually not that complicated, but some of it is just the framework we approach, and then having the time. I mean, what she said in that quote that we put in the report was that they said to her, look, you guys, we have all day. We'll wait until we get to the point where we can talk through this and listen to both people who were involved in the fight and work through it together. And so many people just never, she said, no one ever said that to me before and had that time. And so some of these are things I think really are not that difficult to implement if we had sort of the mindset and the framework and then the resources to make it happen.
Absolutely. And real quick, because I don't want to take up all the time, I do have to hop off. Anecdotal, but this, actually my youngest son was a criminology major from my UP and came out and got 2 different positions within, not Schumann, but different positions in juvenile detention centers, and just couldn't take it because he went in there thinking, I'm going in here to help the kids. And the more seasoned staff were pushing him away from that and saying, no, we don't want you to do that. We're not, we're not here to be friends with them or try to, it was, it was just so frustrating. He finally just went and did something totally different. And it was at 2 separate, separate places. And I tried so hard because he has the heart, he's my kid. So he has the heart to try to make a difference and help. And he was trying to reach those kids and get to the why of what was going on with them. But he got so much resistance from staff that he just got to the point where he said, I just can't do this. And I tried to get him to hang in there because I'm like, these kids are getting to know you and they're used to being let down. So can you hang in there? And he, these kids are, and these young people are different. They're like, yeah, I'm not taking one for the team. Most of us here have been taking one for the team for a very long time. But we got generation now. They're like, yeah, the team doesn't care about me. I'm not taking one for the team, right? So it just, again, anecdotal, because that's just my conversation with him. But still, it just was something I've seen, and hopefully we can get to the point of making a difference that way, changing that mindset.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point because part of it is just a kind of culture that gets built into, like any institution or organization, like builds up a culture over time, and some of it is disrupting that or change, and which is, I think, why all of us who were working on this thought, well, this is an opportunity because that facility is closed. So we're starting fresh in a sense of like, how can we use this chance to kind of start in a different place? Because, and I do think that's true. A lot of, this is true in in my institution where I work in the university, right? Professors say, well, we do this because this is how it was when I was here. So we're gonna, that's everywhere, right? And so I think even a lot of those staff maybe that your son was working with, right? If things look different, it's not that people can't be open to changing, but it has to be systemic and not piecemeal.
Yeah, I've been trying to use that coach approach on that when people say that, well, this is how we've always been doing it. And so my question is, so how's that working for you? Because if it's not, like, we might need to look at something a little bit different.
Other questions, comments, ideas about how to move forward, anything is open. And I know Tashira and Isis, you two just joined, but we have been talking through the Reimagining Safety report together, and we can drop that link again in the chat. Let me try to do that because you probably can't see the chat from before, but I'm gonna mute and try to put the link there while other people unmute and share thoughts.
Thank you, Sarah. I've kind of been having to go in and out today. My apologies to the group. I'm happy that the report is in publication. That's amazing, Sarah. I think that this probably has been said, but I heard earlier where you were talking about just historically how we got to Schumann and how it came to close. And I've said this before, but I'll drop a pin here as well, that, we can't take the approach to the carceral system writ large and what we know about mass incarceration out of context when it comes to the juvenile legal system, because they parallel themselves in so many ways. And so the rise of the carceral state, the rise of this super predator narrative all happened around the same time. And so if we are doing the work to peel back mass incarceration for adults and to get rid of things like debtors' prisons and all of these horrible practices, and then the same, of course, and I think everyone on this call knows that has to be done within a juvenile context as well. And so I'm happy that you're lifting up all of those restorative justice practices that we know actually work.
Thanks to Shira and thanks, Isis, for your note in the chat. And that part of what I don't know if I said explicitly yet today, but is certainly in the report, is that, a lot of the approaches that we're trying to disrupt and move away from in some of the systems are part of the institutionalized racism that we have in the US, right? And that part of why the punitive approaches that we have and the kind of bifurcation of where different youth with similar behaviors often get sent in our society is related to this. And so it is part of a much broader project, I think, thinking this through, as Tashira pointed out, right, about making changes in lots of different places, but approaching some of those with the big picture in mind, I think is what will hopefully make it possible to actually make some changes.
So I do have a quick comment for the group. I want to know, did you all hear about this as well? I was in a meeting a couple of days ago, and they mentioned that Penn Hill School District is going to have their own police department for the schools. Did anyone else hear anything like that? And if you have, like, what do you all think about that? Like, I know that we're all on the same page as far as we agree that our children do not need to be handcuffed and arrested and, you know, taken away, and that we need to integrate organizations and support that are actually pertaining to the issues that they're going through. But this is the first that I'm hearing about the school district initiating their own police department specifically for the school. What are you all's thoughts on that? Or has anyone else heard that? Am I the only one?
No, I've definitely heard it. This is Mary Hall. Yeah, no, that's been online, an analysis of it.
What are you all's thoughts on that? Like, do you think it's an alignment? Like, is it a solution? Like, how does everybody else feel?
You know, that's something that this work group has been looking at in terms of Pittsburgh Public Schools, which has its own police department, and part of, I'll just say what I feel like we learned together through this work group about Pittsburgh Public Schools is that because there's, you know, PPS has its own police force and there are always police there, and those seem to be the adults who at times are available when maybe counselors and social workers are not. It seems like that contributed to really high rates of arrest and referral to law enforcement in PPS. I mean, obviously it's a complex factor. So, you know, I know many of us were advocating for getting police out of PPS. So to me, it doesn't seem like a positive thing. I know, yeah, that's just my opinion from what I've learned and seen. And my kid, well, one kid graduated, but I have a kid at PPS, and yeah, and having looked at all the data too, I'm not really happy with then having so many police officers and not enough counselors and social workers and other support people. And I think it actually comes back to what we were talking about before in terms of how we approach kids and how we interact. And one thing we've seen, and then I'll be quiet so other people can talk, but sometimes, you know, there was a lot of defense of the police officers in PPS, you know, like, oh, they're really nice people, they have these great relationships with the kids, and they may be really nice people and they may have these great relationships with kids, but sometimes when the person who gets called in is in a police uniform, that automatically triggers certain responses in a lot of kids. And also there's a fundamental conflict of interest when the person who's being brought in to talk to and support a kid, and we're asking the kids to trust them, is the one who has the power to arrest them or refer them on in the system. I think that we need more other people who can support kids that don't have that fundamental conflict of interest.
I think
And I
there's
feel like
general consensus that we need fewer police and more social workers. I think part of the problem that I've heard recently is that there are simply not enough social workers and counselors available. And I think this group needs to talk with the universities and schools about getting some more people recruited into a pipeline for training as social workers. And that's something that's going to take time, but we have to start now. to deal with that. I think especially with COVID and recent developments, the increase of violence in schools, we need those social service reports, and there's simply not enough social workers and counselors to meet the need. And I think as a group, that's what we should address head on by convening meetings with the universities and schools. I mean, we always think of Pitt, Duquesne, Carnegie Mellon, and so on, but there are smaller educational institutions in our region as well. And I think there needs to be some coming together to address that deficiency. Even if a district agreed that they needed more social workers and counselors, they aren't there to be hired. What do other people think about that?
I agree 100%. I really don't feel like that was a solution. I feel like we're starting from scratch again. For Penn Hills to put together I understand that the police department is focused and dedicated on the school district, but I feel like we're starting from scratch because there's still police officers. And even, yes, I do understand that a lot of these officers have built relationships, with the students, but at the end of the day, they're still police officers. And for maybe the couple of children who are just so out of control and they're fighting, and then a teacher tries to stop the fight, and then the teacher winds up getting hit. Now, in an extreme situation like that, yes, a police officer would be appropriate. But like we've been talking about, the majority of these referrals are not those type of referrals. Like the referrals are coming from children who have underlying conditions. And yes, I totally agree. We do need to reach out, but not just to the universities, but we have existing, my organization, Ruth's Way, Gwen's Girls, we have existing organizations that have already did the work, have already did the studies. We have people, but still we're not inside of those schools at the capacity that we should be. We should be in the schools at the same capacity that they have the police officers at. My personal opinion.
I've heard that said before, and I think maybe this group could look into that more intensively in terms of, I know that there are state requirements in terms of who can be in the schools dealing with students, and for a good reason, because people need to be screened. You couldn't have community representatives just, coming in who were unknown to the school administration, and where goals and objectives haven't been agreed upon. There needs to be a process, but I think we need to address exactly what you just were saying in terms of how do you get more caring, trained adults into the schools, and not be so focused on having law enforcement there.
And I do think a lot of that is an issue of, both the school boards and then, who principals and other people in charge of specific schools, because I'll be honest, I don't know. I wasn't aware that there was a shortage of social workers. I mean, we train so many people, even just at Pitt, and there are a growing number of social work programs in our region, for example. So it's my perception, at least at Pittsburgh Public Schools, that more resources have been devoted to hiring police instead of counselors and social workers. And there are, at many schools, a real shortage of supportive adults. And I don't think it's because they can't find anyone to hire, but I don't know for sure. But either way, maybe that's part of understanding how we can move that needle, right? And shift to those resources, which is certainly something we have been working on through this group, I would say.
And the other thing is, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
The other thing is being sure that those people are already on hand, are properly trained in terms of how to de-escalate a given situation. You still hear so many stories of um, teachers, administrators, law enforcement, taking inappropriate actions and making things worse in terms of something that occurs in the school system. I think that's another area that needs to be addressed is training that can happen for those adults that are already hired in there.
Absolutely, that's exactly where I was actually going, because we're in the urgency of now, and so while we're it's the all of the above. Actually, we do need more counselors, but we also need more training and understanding of trauma within those who are already within the school system, and making sure that they know how to be trauma responsive, and that this is not, got to look at this as more than just a job. And I mean, I have teachers, I get it, I know that there's a lot of responsibility with that, but there has to be that trauma informed and trauma responsive piece for everybody who, I'm sorry, I'm all in on trauma. I think everybody on earth needs trauma training so they know how to deal with everybody else, but especially with our kids, because this is, we're molding our future here. And so anybody who comes in contact with a child should actually be required to have that type of training. But I agree, pull in some social workers, but the whole concept of it is that they're there to be taught. So the people who are teaching them and working with them need to have that as a requirement. And I gotta hop off, I'm sorry. I'll wait a couple minutes in case anybody's telling me, no, I disagree. I'll hold on for a few minutes, but I gotta run to the next meeting, and I hate it because I always love being on here.
Tamara, if I could jump in before you leave us, there are people in the Attorney General's office at the state level, that agree with you. It seems to me it would be good if we initiated some meetings with them. Their representative does already come out to this part of the state. And it seems to me it would be good if we followed up on this and to see what resources could be brought to bear exactly along the lines that you're saying. Someone that I like very much, who's Josh Shapiro's deputy, is Rob Reed. And he is very much in favor of exactly what you're saying. And I think having a panel discussion with maybe someone like Rob and people from our organizations to highlight the need for doing this would be very helpful.
Right. And I know Rob. Rob and I go way back. As a matter of fact, that we've been having these conversations, and we have a trauma group actually that has been discussing this exact same thing. And he's great, but I think we have our own trauma experts already in our area, because the issue that Rob had trying to get into Allegheny County was, he was an outsider, which is why we started the conversation that we started, so that it can be a homegrown conversation and people can understand it. We could just meet people where they are to explain it to them. So I think, Dr. Kathy and Tawanda, we have a lot of people already who can actually have this conversation. We just need the ears to listen and the funding to back it.
Well, why don't we start by looking at the funding and start with our local political leadership and educational leadership, and just address that with them and get something started. I think there's consensus that needs to be done. I think somehow we have to pull it together.
I don't know where, and that's the main point, the funding. I know we've had these partnerships. We've had, particularly Roosevelt, we've had these partnerships with schools for 17 years. And for 17 years, they've repeated to tell us we're there, but we can only be there at a small capacity, because guess what? They keep telling us that they don't have the funding. Now, what I can say, I'm very, very proud that they brought in, well, they introduced the ESSER funding, right? They introduced the ESSER funding this year, but that's $10,000. Like, I mean, I'm grateful for any funding that we get, but you all on here know, anybody that does payroll or buys supplies, you know that we need a whole lot more than $10,000. So God's grace, that is a wonderful start. And I'm glad that we've been introduced to the ESSER funding for after school programming, but we have to do better. And I've heard Mayor Gainey speak repeatedly, about his new areas of focus, and that is one of his main areas of focus, but we need to see it. We really need to see it, and that's the issue, along with you all saying that, there's not enough social workers and counselors. I mean, they're out there, but nobody wants to pay for it. That's a problem.
It is. Yeah, because everybody should be compensated for the work that they're doing. And, we have to invest. We know what, a lot of us know what the solutions are, at least some of them. And like, let's put some money towards it. I agree. Oh, I was going to say real quick, because I'm so late for this other meeting. But this is such a great conversation. So we actually had the, one of the co-chairs for the education action team from PA's, Hill PA. And her recommendation was that we go to the schools because they do have the money in their budgets, and that, that it's actually there, and that we should actually take a look at it. So I'm going to leave that right there. And hopefully we'll have these conversations. Dr. Kathy, we'll talk some more about it. And Tawana's been a part of that conversation. I know you all have some other stuff to talk about, but she firmly believed that we need to go and say, you have these things, some line items in your budget that could actually cover this. So what we don't want is to ask any of our experts to go in and do this training and not be compensated for it. So, all right, sorry.
Yeah, and I'm with the Youth Court Initiative, and we were granted a considerable amount of ESSER funding, and maybe we could find some touch points where the goals of the two groups meet, and we could perhaps share some of our funding in a related kind of way. I think we ought to be able to solve the funding issue and get like-minded people working together.
Awesome.
So I've been doing some research around the Great Resignation that they're now calling the Great Reshuffle. Are you familiar with that concept around COVID and everything? And so what's disappointing is that people who have been looking at this for a while do not think it's going to get better anytime soon, especially for the positions. It's because the Great Reshuffle is just the idea that people realize that they have an opportunity to choose what they want. So when you were talking about the like younger generation and choosing, they're very much focused on a work-life balance. And so if that is not present, and there's not compensation, we're talking about compensation for trainers and compensation for teachers and social workers and counselors, they're going to find something else so that they have, a balanced life as well. And I mean, I have a lot of friends in the school system who, at a young age in like their 20s are burnt out already. So I think it's like a huge issue in regards to that. It's a huge systemic issue that, these kind of positions, especially female-led positions. I even wonder, I started kind of looking a little bit online, but I couldn't find out. I'm like, well, I wonder what the difference is between the pay of that school police officer and a school teacher. And also, I Googled, I could find Highland Park was hiring for their school police officer, not Highland Park. I knew I was going to do that. Highland up in Natrona Heights, Highland, whatever that is. And, you don't need a bachelor degree or anything. You just need 2 to 3 years experience of some kind of security job. And but they're probably going to make like $40,000, and that's probably about as much as our teachers are going to be making. And I wonder, what the difference is, and I even think about one of the things that kind of drives me a little crazy is when I go to court. I remember as a caseworker, I'm running around talking with my families, trying to, keep everything straight of all of my families and who has court, and trying to communicate and all of that. And, the sheriffs would be kind of sitting there kicking up their feet. And I would witness sometimes when their responses were absolutely not trauma informed. It's ingrained in my mind when a gentleman who came up, they brought him from the jail and he went to stand up. I knew exactly what he was doing, but he like went to stand up because he needed to get something. And the sheriff came over, had his hand on his gun, standing next to him, and it was like he's just standing up to get something. Like it was that kind of response, and thinking about the pay difference between the social workers that were in the room and that sheriff. And again, want to say, especially kind of echoing what Sarah said, not saying that all sheriffs are like that or anything, but so I think it's a huge systemic issue that unfortunately I'm not quite sure how to address that. And the other thing that I wanted, and I actually had a conversation about this morning. So I'm the project manager for Crossover Youth in CYF. I'm also the project manager for our commercial sexual exploitation for children. And I'm also helping with a project of ending the need for group home placements. And so, and one of the things that I've learned from Dr. Liz Miller, I'm sure many of you know her on this phone, on this call, is that one of the things that she talks about is she's like, Dara, I have sat in this meeting and this meeting and this meeting and this meeting, and we talk about the same thing in all of these meetings. And a lot of it is anti-oppression, anti-racist, not pro-trauma, trauma informed supports and healing focused services. And it is so like, in all of those projects that's what we talk about. And so even like looking at this, and there's so much crossover between the ending the need for group home placement. We also talked to many youth and the ending the need for group home placement, and the stories weren't as tragic as what you had covered, but still just a huge need for obviously trauma informed care. And so many of these things, so many cross over exactly what we're doing with ending the need for group home placement, and even a lot of training around the trauma informed healing focused with our kids with CSEC, which is the sexual exploitation of our children, and needing to talk to law enforcement and making sure that they have training. And it's all the same conversation over and over again in all of these different areas. And so I would really love to see some kind of opportunity to bring like the forces together and be able to do a lot of this work. And then just like the last thing I was thinking about too, in the conversation I was having this morning, especially around the anti-racist, anti-oppression, is that the trainings are great, and there's so much internal work that really thinking outside the box of how we approach it with workers. And we were having a conversation about because a lot of that is not about what you know in your head, but it's how you respond in your heart. And so that takes a lot of internal thought, internal process, humility, and it's almost more of like a spiritual conversation in a sense. And so really thinking outside the box of how we do that training to actually affect change and create a more humble workforce in their response. So sorry, that was a lot there, but some things I was thinking while we were talking.
Thanks, Dara. Very well said. Are there other thoughts? I mean, we're a smallish group. I know, I don't think there's probably a need to continue this meeting all the way until 5 p.m. I think most of us have had a chance to talk, although we all welcome anyone else who would like to share ideas or thoughts. And then I know in a minute or two, Dr. Kathy was going to tell us a little bit about what's happening with the pre-arrest diversion. But I want to make sure we have space for anyone else who wanted to share thoughts.
Just quickly, last week was a good week for the process. We had 2 meetings. The first on Tuesday was with some of the key stakeholders and people who would, and organizations that would potentially be spaces where we would refer our young people and their family to. And so we gave them information about where we are right now. We're looking to potentially, hopefully launch early September. We're internally this week and next week having meetings to really finalize the deadline and the timeline. And I think for the first few weeks, it'll be focused on those that we know refer to the system the most. And so that would be the police officers, the school districts, magistrates, judges, like getting in front of them. But then also opening up to the general community to let them know that this is an option of, calling 211 and then getting access for young people that would need help instead of calling 911. Then on Thursday, we met with the judges and the magistrates and some of the key law enforcement officials to give them the same presentation. And they all seem to be very excited about this potential network that could be utilized instead of referring kids to the juvenile justice or child welfare system. So just stay probably in the next maybe 2 to 3 weeks, we will have additional information about the specifics. We'll have our logo and some of the information cards and things that we can, tangibly give people to hand out to them so that they, know more about what this initiative is. Any questions?